name is Dr. Natalie Petouhoff, and I'm currently a lecturer at UCLA and in the Anderson School of Business, and it took me 4 years to get them to say yes to a course in social media and social business. Very interesting, right? When I'm not teaching, I'm a consultant and a strategist, and my background is management consulting, former Forrester analyst that covered customer service, CRM, and social media. And then I spent a year in an agency really trying to understand what the particulars are with respect to social media and the agency world. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I talk to my students about and some of my clients, putting a frame of reference, a path to analyze, and a process to create structure in an unstructured world. So this is the outline of the course that I teach. And what I found was that in an unstructured world, a lot of people are unsure exactly how to approach social media. And if you look at step 5, that's where most people jump in. They jump into, they set up a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and they start interacting and saying things like, "Happy Monday," in Facebook, and then wonder why there's not a return on investment for social media. And one of my specialties, thank you, Lisa. Lisa's my friend. I really appreciate your laughter. It is kind of humorous, but it is also kind of sad to see that people are not really grasping this medium and really understanding what it takes to really get a business return. And one of my specialties is calculating the return on investment for social media. So if you ever need help with that, let me know. So what I did was I created 6 categories that look at how do you structure your social media project or initiative. And the first one really starts with step 1, which is monitoring and listening. And then step 2 is measurement. Most people skip that because they don't measure, or they're not sure how to measure, or they don't think you can measure. Step 3 is finding your audience. And the reason that they're in this order is that monitoring is really important because it actually helps you build the rest of your program. Finding your audience means figuring out who are your customers, who are your advocates, who are your bad advocates, where are they located in social media, and actually making sure that in your contact CRM database you not only have their email and their phone number, but you also have their social credentials so you can reach out to them in the social world. Step 4 is really looking about studying that audience. What are they passionate about? What do they care about? And then creating content that's going to really get them to engage with you. And then if you do all these steps, by the time you design your interaction, it's going to be a really amazing interaction. You're going to get that return on investment. The first 5 steps are pretty easy. Step 6 really should be relabeled as politics. And that's not something that I can always help people with. It really depends on whether your executives, your CEOs truly understand social media. And one of the things that I find is that oftentimes they realize they need to do it because everybody's jumped on board. But one of the most difficult things is having them understand the business value and not delegating it downward to kind of functional roles, because what happens is the functional roles kind of fight over who's going to own the social customer, who's going to buy the tools, and who has kind of a say-so out there in the social space. So that gives you kind of a structure of how I approach social media. And today we're just going to do lesson 1. If you want, you could sign up for my class at UCLA to do the rest. But today we're just going to do first part. So in the first part is how well does the brand know their target audiences? And what's the benchmark for sentiment and share of voice, especially compared to your top 3 competitors? And then what is the company doing well, and what would be better if? So this is one of my favorite sayings: the more things change, the more they stay the same. And one of the things I often get asked by executives, they'll say, "Dr. Nat, come over here. I want to ask you a question, but don't tell anybody I told you this." I'm like, "What?" Big ear. They go, "I don't understand social media." I'm like, a lot of people don't, right? And good for you for admitting it. Well, what I found was that if you've not read the Clue Train Manifesto, it was written in 1999, and they actually predicted what is happening to business today. They predicted that there would be a place and time where the customer would be in charge of the message, and that there would be an enabling technology, which is really the advent of Web 2.0, and we're here now, and this is literally your opportunity in business. If you go back in time, many scholars had suggested that it was important to listen to your customers, employees, and partners. And if you don't know Edward Deming, you might want to check him out. He's kind of the father of quality. And one of the things that he said was that transformation is not for the timid or faint-hearted, and that's kind of what social media is to me. So he was predicting the doom of the American auto industry. He went to Chrysler, Ford, and GM, tried to get them to really listen to their employees, listen to their customers, integrate that feedback back into the organization, and Detroit sent him packing to Japan. And now we have what we have in terms of, the auto industry having to take subsidies and transform themselves. So when people ask me about social media, I say it's really this process of really understanding what your customers think, what your employees think, and integrating that back in. And I'll tell you a short story. So my degrees are in engineering from UCLA and University of Michigan. When I first got out of school, I got a job at GE, and we were building tungsten carbide tool bits. Yay! Wasn't exactly what I thought I'd be engineering, but the salary was nice, and so I was like, okay. So I go to my first meeting, and I have my little suit on, and I'm like all ready to contribute and make a difference. And so the salespeople were saying, well, we need more of these gold ones. So there are two kinds of coatings that we were putting on the tungsten carbide tool bits. One was titanium nitride, and it's a pretty hard material, and it's golden color, and then aluminum oxide, which was a very tough, strong material. So the salespeople are pounding their fists on the table, and they're saying, we need more gold ones. And the engineers are going, no, don't be silly. The white ones, they last longer, they're stronger. This is what we need. So I raise my little hand, and I say, have we ever asked our customers what they think? And the room roars with laughter. Why would we ask our customers? They don't know. I'm like, really? And that's the moment that I realized that in my DNA, my makeup of who I am and what I care about, is I care about the customer. I care about what other people think. So at the end of the meeting, I went to my boss and I said, hey, can I have a couple of tungsten carbide tool bits? I'm going to go to some of the machine shops down the street and just do a little focus group. And he said, okay, but clock out, because I'm not paying you for this. I'm like, okay. So I go to the machinists, and these are guys that have been working on the line for 30 years. This is what they do day in and day out. And I held out the 2 tungsten carbide tool bits, and I said, which one do you like better and why? And 10 times out of 10, they said, oh, Dr. Nat, we like the gold one better. And I said, really? I said, it doesn't last as long as the white one. And they go, yeah, but the gold one, it makes us happy. So I went back and told my boss, but they didn't take the advice. So I want you to meet John Boyd. He is a military strategist, a colonel and a fighter pilot, and his theories have been very influential in military sports and business. And he's known for something called the decision cycle, and so you might be wondering, how does this apply to business? Well, he created the OODA loop, and it's really how we generate new ideas to thrive and grow in an uncertain and competitive world. So when I read this, I was like, maybe this is something that we could use to deal with social media. So the first step of OODA is to collect data. So now you kind of see why this is making sense, because here we are at a sentiment symposium. Analyze and synthesize that data, right? So data itself is not really insights till you really understand what it means. And then determine a course of action. And then the last step is acting on those decisions. So the question I have for you today, when you think about all of the content that you're hearing, is how fast does your company OODA? Do you have systems to monitor and measure what customers think and feel and know, what employees think and feel and know? And do you take that information and integrate it back into your company? To me, it kind of sounds like what Deming was saying. This is a slide from Gartner, and what Gartner shows us time after time is that companies may collect feedback. They may talk about it with their staff. They may have some sort of alert or insight from it. But 10% use it and 5% actually improve their companies. So if that's true, think about 2 companies that actually take the feedback from social media and integrate it back into their company versus a company that doesn't. And here's 2 extremes, United Airlines and Zappos. right? So Zappos is very active in social, very aware what the customer thinks, and is constantly changing. And United is a little bit slower. So if you were actually the company that ODA'd faster, you'd have a decided time advantage over your competitors. Now, what's interesting in military operations and looking at fighter pilots, this ODA process takes place in nanoseconds, right? They have to figure out, is that friend or foe, and then make a decision and take an action on it. In corporations, that process is much slower, if at all. Oftentimes, strategy is very rigid and followed till next year's planning cycle. And in this economy, this social age, we can't really wait to change our strategy. So it's very critical to validate that we're on track and to correct things. And it's not just about doing this once, but it's really having an internal process where you do the ODA loop over and over and over. And when you do that, you'll have repeated success. So now we're going to look at social media monitoring as a way to do that ODA loop. And so the question is, what's the sentiment and share of voice compared to your competitors? And I thought that I would do a case study to show you a company that didn't ODA and what happened to them. And many of you are probably familiar with the case study, but maybe you've never seen it framed in this way. So in working with brands, especially at the agency level, we got to look at what happens to brands that don't do social media monitoring to understand their audiences. They don't understand what customers are saying in social networks, and they don't collaborate cross-functionally on social media initiatives. And one of the things, having been a management consultant, we did a lot of systems integration, and oftentimes we'd have change management training and sessions to get buy-in, and they would almost always be crossed off, the SOW, because they saw it as something that wasn't important. And so what we're seeing now is that it's really important to collaborate cross-functionally, because if you don't, you might have PR saying one thing and customer service saying another, and so it can be very confusing to the customer. So in the end, if you're not collaborating, you can actually fracture your brand. So here's my case study. It's not uncommon in this economy that a company loses its way. In September 23rd, 2010, Blockbuster Video went bankrupt. Why? Well, because of competitors like Netflix. So now let's look at what happened to Netflix. And one of the questions that I looked at when I saw this case study was, I was wondering, could social media monitoring the brand sentiment and using it to do the ODA loop, might that have helped them? So in 2010, this is a sentiment graph, and we looked at what the negative sentiment was about, and it's about Blockbuster late fees. So you can clearly see in 2010, the bigger the word means the bigger the more volume of that particular sentiment. And so people were upset about late fees. So kind of the conclusion here is if Blockbuster was actually listening, they would have this strategic data to make new business decisions. But they're a big old company, and so they ended up going bankrupt. And so when you look at this word cloud, what you see, very interesting, this was the announcement of Blockbuster's bankruptcy, is that there's a little word up there, and it's Netflix. So in the midst of the demise of Blockbuster, you see a competitor coming up in conversation. So if you look at the customer sentiment for Blockbuster's bankruptcy, you can see the negative conversations in social media. So here's one where Meredith says, Blockbuster doesn't stand a chance with their evil late fees. Blockbuster's late fees are the worst. No wonder Blockbuster's having problems. Late fees still exist. No wonder Netflix is kicking their butt. Never renting from BB again. So what you start to see is you can really see what people are saying, you see what they're upset about, and that's really important data. So now let's flash forward to July 2011, and let's look at what Netflix was doing. So when you look at a graph like this, you can click on it and you can see there's a spike there. So what's interesting is to kind of see what your level of conversation is in general. But when you click on it, now you can see why that spike was so. And the spike really came from the CEO's Facebook page. And what was interesting in analyzing this was there were over 81,000 comments. Less than 1,500 were positive. So 80,000 were negative. Things that make you go, So when we did a word cloud on this, we looked at, okay, what were people saying? And it was about the price hike and about streaming, and that's really what they were concerned about. And when we did a buzz graph, which basically says what are the words that are related to each other, there was anger, canceled, drop, and greedy. Not exactly words that you'd want associated with your brand. So here's an example of not really hearing. And I think part of the thing that happened with Netflix was it wasn't so much that they raised the prices, it was the end of the post from the CEO, and it said, as always, our members can easily choose to change or cancel their unlimited streaming plan, unlimited DVD plan, or both by visiting your account. So to me, I think they kind of baited people, right? So when you start to think about, does your CEO really understand social media, and do they understand the impact of a blog post like this, what it might be? So to me, this is an example of not really listening or hearing, and this is Amy, and her comment is, I did a cut and paste of a lot of the comments, and this is pretty typical. It says, you've managed to pretty much piss off all your customers, including me. Is this your real plan? If so, you're doing a great job. I've decided to become even more friendly with my local Redbox. It may not deliver to my mailbox, but since I have to go to the grocery store to get the popcorn, I'll go ahead and get my movies there too. So if you truly want to make your customers happy and keep this nasty new pricing update your streaming selections to include all of your DVD library. Another really key point. Big issue for a lot of the customers was the library wasn't big enough. If you won't do this, then go sit in a room all by yourself with your DVDs. We'll be going somewhere else. So here's another one from Craig. And he says, I'll be canceling everything and finding someone else like Amazon to pay. Most of the titles I want to see are only on DVD, so paying that much for streaming, plus that much more for DVD, with no price break for being a loyal customer and combining the two isn't attractive to me as a consumer. So what happens when you don't listen and you don't hear what the sentiment is and you act on it without considering this feedback? So despite the negative comments on July 12, 2011, on September 19, 2011, Netflix sent out a notice on the price hike. And the results, drumroll, press coverage. So every single brand who has a product wants the press to cover it, right? It's really important. But look what happened. The press coverage was extremely negative. So titles, Netflix stock erases 12 months of massive growth, crashes to a 52-week low. Quickster from Netflix, the worst product launch since New Coke. Customers angry over revamped pricing are deserting Netflix. Netflix crushes its own momentum. So those are titles from various publications. So now, let's look at one more piece of data. When we were looking through the data, what we found is one of the pieces of information was this word Quickster. And Quickster was the name of the new company. And when we did a Twitter search, what we found was that the ad handle for Twitter belonged to this guy, Jason. And Jason doesn't tweet a lot. At the time, he had about 12,000 followers. And this is an example tweet from Jason, and I'm reading it verbatim. Bored as shit, wanna blaze, but at the same time I don't. Aw, fuck it. Where's the bowl? Spark me up. Now, if you work in PR marketing, you would say that this is not on brand. So what's really interesting is to look at some of the tweets that people, when they were talking about Quickster, it said, what the hell are you guys up to? Quickster, really? The blog comments are amazing, over 24,000 almost negative. Netflix makes great suggestions like how they're turning their DVD services into Quickster. So when we analyzed what was happening and the responses, we saw that the 3 top comments were Reed, so as Reed Hastings is the CEO, and apologize. So what Reed did was, once this happened, he realized he made a boo-boo, so he went out and he created an apology. And the reaction to the apology was almost worse than the initial faux pas. And one of the things I tell the companies that I consult with is, you don't have to be perfect. Like, don't stick your head in the sand and do the ostrich if you're concerned about social media. The truth is, the conversation is going on with or without you. So the best way to control it, right, but there is really no control, is to be part of it, to monitor, to understand what's there. And if you make a mistake, say you're sorry. To me, social media is very similar to a relationship. If you've done something wrong and you go to someone and you say, gosh, you know what? I'm really sorry. I won't do that again. It kind of melts your heart a little bit, and you go, okay, they made a mistake. Now, if they keep making the same mistake over and over, then you kind of know that they're not very sincere. But this is really the humanization of brands and of companies, and it's really a big shift. So let's look at what CNN said. So, right in the middle of the biggest recession since the Great Depression, Netflix now, instead of a sincere apologies, all we get is excuses and a flimsy new name. One of the things that when people saw there was a video apology, and one of the things that came across was that he was very arrogant in his apology. And I think to this day, I don't know if he really understood what really happened. So was it really the price hike, or was it how they responded to their customers? And if you look at most, it says here, here's Wall Street Journal reporting that overwhelmingly people were livid. So if you're a shareholder in this company, if you're a customer of this company, start to think about those stakeholders and how they might feel about how they're really being treated. In the Wall Street Journal, it said that the analyst downgraded Netflix to an average and slashed its price to $185 from $322. So when people say it doesn't matter whether I participate in social media, it doesn't matter if I don't really understand it, doesn't matter if I don't take that feedback, look at that sentiment and really integrate it back into my business, here's a good case study that says it very well could. Here's another one that says, so Reed Hastings, I messed up, apology. Reed Hastings blamed arrogance for not reaching out to customers prior to its decision this summer to jack up subscription fees for some customers by 60%. Not only did the move enrage customers, but it had a negative effect on price share. Now, here's another piece of data. So if you have a company, you need to be monitoring not only your company, but you need to be monitoring your competitors. Because guess what Blockbuster did? They said, well, tweet us why you're leaving Netflix, right? So in the midst of all this turmoil, the competitor said, I'm going to jump on this bandwagon and try to steal some customers. So they offered the top 3 most creative tweets that tweeted, goodbye Netflix, a 1-year subscription to Blockbuster. Truly, I couldn't have made this stuff up better. It's really interesting. True life is stranger than fiction. So, does social media sentiment really matter? In the end, Netflix lost 800,000 customers. So when you think about that, could your business sustain that? And more importantly, would you want it to have sustained it? So where does your company sit in the social media adoption curve? Many of you who are here are most likely early adopters or innovators, right? You get it. You may not be able to calculate the ROI, but you get it in your gut feel that this is something important and real. Most of the people in organizations are the early majority, so what I'm referring to is Geoffrey Moore's technology adoption curve. The first 2, that's where the uptake really kind of takes in any new technology field. The early majority, it's the largest group of people underneath that curve. And what you find is that they're the most resistant. But if you convince them, then they'll really be on board and they'll help the late majority come along. So what we kind of see from this little case study is that some companies don't see social media as the key to innovation, to change, to retaining customers, acquiring new customers, or gaining a competitive edge. So to bring it back around to the OTA loop, I think social media is the new reality check for every single department, for brand promises, for looking at key marketing messages, and oftentimes PR marketing will make promises for the brand, and then customer service is the one who has to deliver on the promise. And that's really where Dell Health came in. If you don't know that case study, let me know, I can send it to you. Jeff Jarvis bought a computer from Dell in 2005. He bought a service package that said that they would come to his house to fix his computer if it broke. When it broke, he called them up and said, "Could you come by?" And they said, "No." And he said, "But that's what I paid for." And they go, "We know." So he ended up writing a bunch of blog posts, getting the Houston Chronicle involved, and that's where Dell Health came from. And it took Dell almost 3 years to really understand this and transform their company to where they are today, which is they have huge social media command centers. So you look at the reality check for every single department. And so when I analyzed this case study, my questions were, where did Netflix really misfire? Did they observe? It doesn't look like they did. Did they orient themselves to this new data to make a different decision? So in July, they knew that the sentiment was negative, but on September 19th, several months later, they went ahead with it. And did they make the right decisions, and did they act appropriately in ways that forwarded their business and in ways that would garner their customers? And they actually did the opposite. They lost customers, and they also caused a whole bunch of customer service calls. So the question is, what is it going to take for the whole industry to understand how social media, how important it is, and what is it going to take to make that change happen? Part of it is asking yourself, are you an OTA leader? Your job as a leader is to OTA faster than your competitors, outmaneuver the competition, observe the ever-changing conditions, decisively act in an effort to beat the competition. So as you're looking at yourself today, and self-reflection is always kind of the beginning of all of this, is look at, are you using social media sentiment to observe what's happening to your company? And then do you have the courage to recognize when things are off course and then take the appropriate action? And so a lot of times what I see are people are in organizations where they might be wanting to do this, but politics get in the way. So you might want to just do a little self-reflection while you're here and ask yourself, so when would now be a good time to be an OTA loop leader? What's interesting about a decision is it is a selection between possible actions. So the question is, do you have the right social media data to make the right decisions? And in conclusion, maybe it's a good idea to listen to your customers. From my story as a young engineer to what we saw that happened with Netflix, the more things change, truly the more things stay the same. It's important to know what's being said, to use that information to create business decisions, and to use social media to interact with your customers and have it result in a positive outcome. So that's my first step in the social media monitoring course, and I thank you very much.